Qui-Gon Jinn makes his return, and amusement park news aplenty. It's Friday, January 21st, and you'll hear about those stories and more this week in Star Wars. This Week in Star Wars is your source for new and noteworthy developments from the galaxy far, far away. I'm your host, Matt Fox. And now, this week's lead story. It was announced this week that Liam Neeson would be reprising his Episode 1 Phantom Menace role as Qui-Gon Jinn on Star Wars The Clone Wars next week. According to the preview footage available online, Qui-Gon will appear to Obi-Wan as a Force ghost to discuss Anakin's future as a Jedi. While this will be the actual first time that the Michael Collins star has reprised his Episode 1 role, rumors were rampant during the production of both Episodes 2 and 3 that Qui-Gon's Force Ghost would appear in those films. In fact, rumors persist to this day that Qui-Gon footage was actually filmed for Episode 3, but cut from the actual film. As I just mentioned, the preview footage is widely available online, and the episode will air next Friday, January 28th, on the Cartoon Network. Amusement park aficionados will have to be bi-coastal this year, as 2 new Star Wars attractions will be opening in Florida and California in the first half of 2011. First up will be a special Star Wars exhibit at Legoland in California. The new exhibit, which is currently being constructed by German Lego technicians, will consist of scenes from each of the 6 live-action Star Wars films. Episode 1, Naboo, Episode 2, Geonosis, Episode 3, Kashyyyk and Mustafar, which by my count is 2 scenes, a Tatooine scene from Episode 4, Hoth from The Empire Strikes Back, and finally Endor from Return of the Jedi. The Star Wars Miniland will open on March 31st. May 20th brings the return of Star Wars weekends to the Walt Disney World Resort, as well as the debut of Star Tours 2, The Adventure Continues in 3D. This according to StarWars.com. The events of this ride take place between the original and prequel trilogies, and, it has been reported, will feature a different storyline on each ride. Plenty of new product trickling out for collectors this week.
Me? I'm a collecting fool.
Captain Locke, the Kmart exclusive Clone Wars trooper, has been reportedly seen at a number of Big Ks across the country. Meanwhile, both Waves 4 and 5 of the Vintage Collection have been reported across the country. Wave 4 is an Attack of the Clones themed wave, while Wave 5 consists of a mixed lot of figures from several films. The Toys R Us exclusive Battle Over Endor multi-packs have been spotted at Toys R Us's across the country, as well as online at TRU.com. Those who placed orders for this multi-pack earlier in the year, however, have seen their orders canceled. If you did place an order before, you may want to verify that it's still existent. Otherwise, head on out to a brick-and-mortar House of Giraffe to see if they're available. Something else that has been showing up at retailers recently are price hikes on the basic figures. Target has jumped their price back up to $8.99 for Vintage Collection figures, while the Toys R Us price hikes to $10.99 have seemed to become permanent. While this is more in line with what we were told to expect from this line last year when it was introduced, it is nonetheless jarring following the pre-Christmas price cuts. Gentle Giant collectors have been treated to a new site this week from the bust and statue maker. The new GentleGiantLimited.com site features enhanced product descriptions as well as a more fluid purchasing process. RebelScum.com let it be known this week that, according to Toy News magazine, there would be a new large-scale vehicle in 2011, and that vehicle would be the attack shuttle from the Clone Wars. According to the blurb, the set will have 2 modes of play, both as a vehicle and as a play set, but of course it is not official until it is announced by Hasbro, most likely at next month's Toy Fair in New York City. Some Star Wars on the small screen news this week. We now, thanks to Amazon.com, have an official release date for the Star Wars trilogies on Blu-ray, and that date is September 27th. On an even smaller screen, Nintendo's 3DS handheld gaming system will be released in the United States on March 27th. LEGO Star Wars 3 The Clone Wars is being listed as a launch title for the 3D gaming platform, and is thus our first official 3D Star Wars content. As reported on earlier episodes, LEGO Star Wars 3 The Clone Wars is available on several other platforms on February 15th. In publishing news this week, Dark Horse released the Star Wars Omnibus A Long Time Ago, Volume 3, which continues its collection of the original Marvel comics. Next week sees the release of Star Wars Legacy War No. 2 and Darth Vader and the Lost Command No. 1. Hey, Carrie Fisher's fat, and she wants you to know about it. Well, if you hadn't heard her talk about it before on stage or in TV specials or in interviews, she's now been hired to tell you by none other than Jenny Craig. Fisher, the most famously self-admitted rotund actress since Kirstie Alley, follows in the wake of the former Mrs. Eddie Van Halen and George Costanza as spokespersons for the weight loss chain. In the commercials, which will begin airing shortly, Fisher promises to lose 30 pounds, and in all seriousness, we wish her the best of luck. And on any other week, that might have been the lighthearted end of the news story, but on this week we learned that George Lucas thinks the world is going to end in 2012, which makes one wonder what all the 3D planning is about. According to numerous media reports earlier this week, Seth Rogen, the star of Observe and Report, had a conversation lasting over 25 minutes with Lucas as well as Steven Spielberg, during which the Star Wars writer and director talked about his adamant belief that the world would end in 2012, as predicted by the Mayans. Happily, I did not record this episode that night as I intended to, because the next day, Lucasfilm released a statement to Wired.com, in which Lynn Hale, a spokesman for Lucasfilm, announced that George did not in fact believe that the world would end in 2012. However, according to the New York Daily News story, Lucas went on to state that he does believe that Stonehenge was built by aliens, the world is flat, and the sun revolves around the earth. There is no indication as to whether or not the conversation with Rogen actually did take place and was simply a hoax, or whether the star of Kung Fu Panda simply imagined the exchange. I'd really like to talk about Anne Hathaway being cast as Catwoman Selina Kyle in the next Batman movie, but unfortunately this podcast is not entitled This Week in Anne Hathaway. Instead, we'll talk about Star Wars, and more specifically, that 30 hours of bonus footage we're going to get on the Blu-ray discs. What's on it? I mean, 30 hours is a lot of time. If you had an hour of deleted scenes and alternate takes from each film, that's only 6 hours. Add a feature-length documentary for each film, that's only another 12 hours. You're still left with 12 more hours of footage. I hope for the sake of those bitter enders out there that the original theatrical films are on there. Why not? That's only just barely over 6 hours. And then you've still got room for a lot of other stuff. And the films themselves. I hope they've got new multiple audio commentary tracks with the stars, with the producers, with a whole track with just Lucas. Having the option to watch the deleted scenes in the film would be great, but it won't happen. What special content do you want to see? What don't you want to see? Go to our Facebook page and post a comment, or send us an email. I'd like to know. Well, as promised, we did record a This Week in Star Wars 2010 year-end wrap-up show. However, I think due to technical difficulties, it's going to remain unreleased and in the vault. I'm very sorry about that because there was some interesting content in there. However, I'm not a good enough technical expert, as you can tell from listening to this show, to really massage it into something that is presentable. Perhaps there'll be a Toy Fair wrap-up again this year that I won't screw up. Also, if you like this show, I'd really appreciate it if you'd go to iTunes and write a review, or post about us in your favorite Star Wars forums on sites across the web. That's how we'll continue to grow the audience, and who knows where that will lead. All that said, sometime in the past couple weeks, we passed our 1-year anniversary, believe it or not. And I want to thank you all for listening each week or so as the new episodes are released. Hopefully 2011 will be as interesting as 2010. And that was This Week in Star Wars. Join us again next week for more news, notes, and developments from the galaxy far, far away. Visit www.thisweekinstarwars.com or www.twisw.com for links to old episodes, news about the show, as well as links to some of the stories we discussed in today's program. You can follow us on our breaking news Twitter feed, TWISWcast, and we welcome comments on our Facebook page. We also welcome news suggestions, questions, and comments via email at host@thisweekinstarwars.com. Help us grow the community. If you enjoyed This Week in Star Wars, please go to iTunes and leave a positive review of the podcast. You've been listening to This Week in Star Wars. We troll the web so you don't have to.
This Week in Star Wars is not affiliated with Lucasfilm, its subsidiaries, or any other entity mentioned in this podcast. Star Wars, its characters, and creations are the property of Lucasfilm. All other trademarks are property of their respective trademark owners. This Week in Star Wars is intended for informational and entertainment purposes only. This podcast is copyright 2010 This Week in Star Wars. Invaluable technical assistance provided by WebStorm Interactive. News, comments, and questions can be directed to host@thisweekinstarwars.com. More information, links to stories presented, past episodes, and additional contact information are available at www.thisweekinstarwars.com.
And damn it, he was a Star Wars fan!